How would you feel about a none of the above option in elections? If that option wins, the election will be held again with new candidates. I'd feel like it's 1985 and Richard Pryor has just made a movie. I was thinking the same thing. What was the deal? Spend $30 million to inherit $300 million? Yup. 30 days to spend $30 million to inherit $300 million, but he can't tell anyone, and he can't own anything more than the clothes on his back by the end of it. What is the name of the movie? Sounds interesting for sure. I know people have already said Brewster's Millions, but it's definitely well worth the watch. If you like it, I'd suggest watching Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. That will lead to a lot of null elections, and over time will lead to people giving up on voting itself. This is a really good point. It's already happened in local state elections. Last year in my area, out of 250,000-ish, under 5,000 people bothered to vote for the school board and other small positions. The winners each had less than 3,000 votes. Ranked choice makes the most sense. None of the above could lead to a lot of open positions and slow down local municipal government even further. It doesn't really make sense for administrative positions like school board to be elected at all. Yes and no, some of the decisions a school board make aren't about administration, but also district policy changes, votes on people's continued employment, etc. Having a representative system and decisions that often have multiple opinions is good when your community's children are the ones affected. But hey, this is just my opinion. I'd rather a ranked choice voting system. Ranked choice is what we need to move to. First, second, third choices. It makes so much more sense than what we're doing now. Australia already uses it. You provide up to 8 preferences, I believe, and you can choose to rank either the parties or the specific candidates. In Ireland you can rank as many numbers as there are candidates. There were over 20 candidates for the local elections in Dublin this year. Sounds good. I don't know why we limit ours. Right now, let's assume there's 3 candidates on the ballot. Simplifying policies to align to keep things simple, let's assume one is far left, one is center left, and one is center right. In this scenario, 25% of people prefer the far left candidate, 35% prefer the center left candidate, and 40% prefer the center right candidate. In addition, the people who prefer the far left candidate would rather the center left candidate win than the center right candidate, even if they'd really prefer the far left candidate, and the people who prefer the center left candidate would rather the far left candidate win. With what most of the US has now, the person who gets the most votes wins election, the center right candidate would win, even though 60% of the population would prefer either of the other 2 candidates over them. In a scenario like this, you'll often see the people who voted for the center-left candidate blaming the far-left candidate and their voters for spoiling the ballot by voting third party. If the left had all just decided on a single candidate to back, they would have had an outcome that the full 60% of them would have found more appealing. You can see this a few times in the history of the US 1912 split between Roosevelt and Taft likely handed the election to Woodrow Wilson, and Ralph Nader's Green Party may have taken enough votes away from Al Gore in 2000 to give George Bush his victory. This is why very few people will vote Green or Libertarian or any other party in the US elections. They know those candidates have basically no chance of winning, and by voting for anyone other than the Democrat or Republican, they make it more likely that the one they find more objectionable wins. Which is a self-defeating prophecy. Since no one will vote for third-party candidates to avoid the spoiler effect, they'll never get enough votes to win. With a ranked choice vote, also known as instant runoff voting, you don't just vote for one person, you vote for all the candidates you like in order of preference. In this scenario, the people who like the far-left candidate could have put their first choice for the far-left candidate and their second choice for the center-left candidate. When the initial vote tallies come in, there's no one with a majority, so the candidate with the lowest total, far left, is dropped, and all of their votes are moved to their second choice, center left. Now the election is checked again. The center left candidate has 60% and the center right candidate has 40%, so the center left candidate wins. The candidate most preferred by the majority is elected, but the people who preferred the third parties were able to vote for the third parties without throwing away their vote, which means the third parties have a chance of getting a high vote total. We saw this happen in Maine in 2018 when they switched to this voting system. The Republican candidate barely had the plurality of votes in the initial vote, but not a majority. And of the 8% of people who voted for independent candidates, more than 2/3 of the ones who included a second choice preferred the Democrat over the Republican, handing the eventual win to the Democrat after the instant runoff. That would most likely benefit the party or candidate with the most money, who can afford to keep running until a candidate is chosen. Also, subsequent elections would likely have lower turnout, and lower turnout tends to benefit extremists. People seem to forget that a lot of rules in Congress exist to prevent the wealthier candidate from abusing their wealth to get their way. Like when Congress can't reach a decision and the government has to shut down temporarily, I hear tons of people say that they should get no pay until they are able to come to an agreement. Sounds good, but wealthy members could afford to hold out indefinitely, while less wealthy members will need a paycheck and give in just to collect money again. Once you have the job, sure, but most of the time it's the party who spends the most who win elections. According to Open Secrets, in the 2018 midterm elections, the candidate who spent the most money won in 88.8% of races in the House and in 82.9% of races in the Senate. The UK limits everyone on spending per seat for this reason. A bigger party can't just outspend everyone. The UK also has limits on spending overall. This doesn't however include grassroots-style electioneering, creating media which advocates support for against a particular party specifically designed to go viral and be distributed by the electorate themselves. It's something I hate, especially because more often than not, certainly in this election, it was more don't vote for this party, they eat babies on both sides. I miss elections when people told you why to vote for them, rather than spewing vitriol about the other candidates. Two unpopular leaders will do that though, I guess. Fuck the other guy is an easier sell when most people don't really like your guy. You make a fair point. It's sad to see that the current state of politics on both sides of the Atlantic, appears to be at least I'm not other guy. One of the parties sent me a dozen leaflets saying only I can beat Party X in your area, stop Party X policy by voting for me, say no to Party X referendum, vote for me. They never even tried to set out their own policy, just focused on how I could stop some other candidate winning. This is available in India and doesn't serve any real purpose other than saving from pain of choosing fiercely impotent candidates which record single-digit votes. In India it works differently, the nota votes are just considered blank votes, and the person who has more votes despite nota votes wins anyway. A nota vote is just a moral fuck you, so I'd say it's not a wasted vote. That signaling hasn't worked in the US. People vote third party and as that vote grows, the media continues to ignore them, and assholes still get elected. Right. It rules out the well they were just lazy spin people like to put on poor turnout. Pardon my half knowledge, but I think this option already exists in India. If the none of the above option gets the most votes, the said election has to be reconducted, but this time all the previous candidates are barred from contesting. Again, my friends told me all the information above. I remember this information only because we went through our election this year. As to how I feel about this, I think it's there just to give the people an illusion of choice. You're absolutely right. Voting nota is counted as wasting a vote, at least as far as people are concerned. I vote third party when I don't like either of the two mains. I want it to be seen that I actually paid attention and casted a vote, but both mains sucked. They too often just chalk low turnout to laziness rather than a bad selection. Why do some people believe that perfect candidates are always available in any community? Sometimes willing, qualified, and moral candidates genuinely don't exist. And sometimes willing, qualified and moral candidates make human mistakes, or might be wrong on a few issues, but right on others. Voting elections encourages an all-or-nothing approach to politics. Also, no candidate will every 100% align with your person ideology ever. There is no perfect candidate. No, it doesn't. That makes no sense at all. Very, very horrible, as if there is no one replacing the current president. He will continue as you can't leave a country without president. This in turn will give huge incentives for current presidents to make it impossible to vote and make the none of the above options as default if they fail to reach a certain voter turnout. Why can't you leave a country without a president? Belgium has been without a government for over a year in the past. Belgium has had a prime minister the whole time. Even in a parliamentary-style government, there can't be a legal vacuum like that. Belgium still has a demi-sciennaire government, the old government, which does day-to-day things, but is not allowed to make major new changes. Furthermore, as Belgium is a monarchy formally, there is always a head of state in function. That is if they follow broadly the same system as the Dutch, which I think they do. Of course you can. The day-to-day operation of the country is not done by the president, nor by the people directly below them. You've got to go down a few layers before you get to people running the day-to-day stuff. The US has certain powers vested specifically in the president, mainly due to the president being the commander of the military, such as the authority to launch a nuclear weapon. Surely, in the absence of the president, that just goes to the highest-ranking member of the military available. The whole point is to keep that button out of the hands of the military. Wouldn't work. It would introduce the possibility of a stalemate, and then who would have the right to govern in the meantime? And all the time your economy would be going down the toilet. At the end of the day, a party isn't going to be able to please all sides, and they have to put forward a candidate. I don't think the president does shit day to day to keep the economy going. He just couldn't approve spending increases. Right, but you're not just electing the president, you're electing the whole party. In the UK, it wouldn't be much of an issue as they have civil servants, government workers who aren't aligned to any political party, who keep things ticking over, but in the US, it's more of a complete change when a new party is elected. Edit. Civil servants, not ministers. It exists already in Brazil. But if that option wins, they go to the candidate with the most votes. You're not only throwing your vote away, you're also helping someone you don't like win. Damn, what's the point of even voting if you're going to choose that? Voting is mandatory in Brazil. Wasn't aware, that makes a lot more sense. That's not the entire story though. If there are enough null votes, the election happens again. It happened a few times already, in small towns. What if your name is none of the above? Hold my illegal campaign funds while I change my name, I'm about to become president. There actually was a guy who legally changed his name to above Xenon so that his name could be at the bottom of the voting list. Runs in various elections and by-elections across Ontario. Reminds me of the guy with the last name Null, who breaks so many computer systems. Sounds like an awful idea that will literally always hurt the voters who try to hold out for better candidates. The people willing to accept that Trump will win even more often, as they won't be split by the option you describe. The system of voting has to be addressed first. People do also need to realize that a country needs leaders, not endless elections, until they can find someone who passes every purity test, checks every box no matter how misunderstood, ignorant, and is not taken down anyway by outright lying propaganda. Now fill every elected office in government with that system. Now make meaningful term limits. The best case scenario here is a government full of populist paper cutouts. The worst case scenario is that it splits the non-authoritarian vote and helps the authoritarian win. Horrible idea. Deal with first past the post, and it will make us less efficient, but accomplish your goals better. Why don't you just have bigger election districts where multiple people get elected? It's not like a single person knows what's best for District X. Last election my candidate got elected among with a bunch of others from parties I don't agree with. It's a way better of representing the will of the people. Edit. Added bonuses. We have almost no negative campaigning as negative ad will just change people's votes to a closely related party instead of no voting. And the high turnout ensures that there is no voter fraud. Edit 2. But a truly radical idea would be to change from representative democracy to actual democracy, where every political seat in local, state and national assemblies are drawn by lots, just like in ancient Greece. Goodbye to both professional politicians and bored billionaires without a hobby. This would solve many issues of US elections, including gerrymandering. Single-member districts are a terribly bad way of representing a diverse people. Multi-member districts make it very hard for minorities to ever elect a representative of their choice. It also diminishes accountability for one candidate to the group. The other idea of selecting leaders at random is a horrible idea and would result in totally unrepresentative and chaotic government. A true democracy would be terrible for a country the size of the US, with such diversity of lifestyles, backgrounds, and life experiences. I think that would cause a civil war. The majorities who live in a few cities would walk all over those that live in large swaths of the rest of the country. You essentially just described our Congress. Congress represents the people in the districts. President represents the country. I'm from Israel and we are at the third round of elections with the same candidates, so yes please. I still don't fully understand how your elections work. Netanyahu keeps losing, but not by enough? What is preventing a decision exactly? In order to successfully form a government in Israel, you must have a majority in the Knesset, equivalent to Congress parliament. No minority governments are allowed. The Knesset has 120 members, so you need 61 to form government. However, Israel has multi-party elections. No single party has won more than 40 seats since the 90s, and there's never been an election where a single party got 61. This means that in order to form a government, you need a coalition. That's where things have been breaking down over the last year. In April, Netanyahu was unable to form a coalition that met the 61-seat threshold due to disagreements with one of the other parties over religious stuff, and so a new election was held in September. This time, Benny Gantz had the opportunity to try to form government, but he couldn't do it either, and Netanyahu got another shot but failed again. This resulted in the calling of a third election, which is set for March. In France, you can leave your voting card empty. If this option has the most votes, you get new elections. Edit. I misunderstood this, sorry. Empty voting cards just don't count. They just represent how many people don't like the options. That's wrong. Empty or invalid votes do no count. Even if 80% of the population went to vote and used a blank piece of paper, the winning candidate would be whoever got the majority in the 20% of remaining valid votes. It has to have 50% majority among people who cast their vote. In a two-candidate election, if you have 33 votes for candidate A, 33 votes for candidate B and 34 blank votes, the result is announced as A and B tied at 50%. That sounds like a very expensive outcome, not to mention that it might happen repeatedly. Even if it only happens once, how long would the second round last? It will cost politicians a lot of time that they could have spent being active in fixing problems. No government want to be in a situation without a leader for too long, it's pretty chaotic. And if a second round happens, does that mean that the current president will not be able to participate? Even if yes, just the fact that people have to go through the entire voting process again will tire out everyone. This is on top of the fact that a fairly big group of voters will not agree completely with any candidate, which makes them likely to choose this option. It's an interesting idea though, and perhaps since the last election it was on people's minds more than ever, but I really don't see it working out due to the size and complexity of an election. I know already that my presidential vote doesn't matter. Whoever wins the Democratic primary will win my state, I'm predicting it now. What I can do is vote in the primary, which may help a bit, though other states have earlier primaries, and as a result, candidates will have started dropping out before I can vote for them, and of course I can vote for other positions, though my congressional seats will go the same way whoever wins the Democratic primary for those seats takes them. Isn't a one-party state just grand? It's like Beijing here, but with more social disapproval of non-party members. 30 to 40% of the state votes Republican or independent. I'm probably still going to vote because I pay attention to politics, but I'm not sure why I bother. Bother? Please do bother. Change sometimes takes a while to take effect. So keep chipping away at it. And convince others around you to do the same. Apathy is strangely and dangerously infectious, don't let it spread around. It might take a few years to affect real change in your state as a whole, but start with the local and build it outwards. It's definitely tough, but the worst thing you can do is call quits or give up. And I'm saying this as someone who's more than happy to see your state as auto win for Dems. Regardless of all that, I agree there needs to be a change in the system itself. It's not apathy, it's your vote literally not mattering because of how the system is set up. The system is broke, but it's also the case that positive change is much more than challenging on a national level. Your vote matters a lot more on local levels than national ones because change is relatively easy in comparison. Furthermore, change in local areas affects national change over time, based on the concept that if it worked over there, it could work here too. The simple fact is that your presidential vote will never matter in comparison to your local votes. I'm talking about district attorney, mayor, town council, etc. If you want to really bring about change, then focus on your backyard until your backyard influences the neighbors. I think it's time to give up on our system, and everyone is too afraid. I don't vote because nobody represents ideas of pursuing accountability and progressive action. We have the power to make things happen quickly, it's just that our system makes it slow through its process. These changes don't take time at all, our leaders don't want change. Trying to fix it isn't helping anymore, you're just giving them power over you and making tensions worse. When the people stop participating and the government ends up showing no concern, everyone will see our whole system is only there for the corporations and people in power. It was never about us. Ever. If the government wasn't corrupt, in some sort of weird and impossible reality, it would see low voter participation as a problem and halt elections instead of going on with them. Sometimes part of the battle is knowing when to give up and start new. Reading your post makes me feel like Sanders is close to what you want. He's strongly in favor of very progressive ideas, wants to address corruption, and he constant advocates for a system that works for everyone, not just for the wealthy or corporations. Is Sanders not someone you want to vote for? What I feel like would work was if we just plain abolished the two-party system and got rid of the Electoral College. Or however it's spelled. I think the two-party system is a natural consequence of the structure of the government, it's not mandated anywhere. So yeah, we should do away with it, but that's going to require changing how the legislative and executive branches work, a massive constitutional amendment. And honestly, I don't think amending the Constitution at this point could possibly go well with so many people acting in bad faith. Could totally destroy the system. The Electoral College is helpful, without it California and New York would run the country. Those states are an example of how it could go wrong within the state for state-level elections. There is no electoral college, and the urban areas that have more voters set policy for the rural areas, which breeds resentment. Or in the case of Virginia this month, it leads to outright rebellion and non-compliance. Trump had 63, but Hillary also did. So that's 120 total votes. In a county of 320 million. Not all of which are able to vote, such as minors, non-citizens, and then those who choose not to. A lot of people choose not to vote because the system in place means they will basically never win. It's not entirely disenfranchising, but some shady shit has happened, specifically gerrymandering. The Electoral College is fine. Something else noteworthy. When Democrat presidents win, their party's candidate usually gets more than 65 votes. Obama got like 90 if I remember correctly. Republican winners consistently and always pull 60 to 70. It's an interesting pattern. It's just sad to me that the country globally seen as the defender of democracy yields such low voter turnouts. Though I guess I understand it's a consequence of the system in place, as you said. People who want different candidates should work for one of them, rather than waiting for the election. People who just vote forget that we can't run angels, we have to run real people. Political parties exist to permit the intelligent selection of candidates. Caucuses. Backrooms. Bargains. But as we moved to primaries and got rid of things like superdelegates, we wound up with expensive media contests for the big contests and no one going out for minor offices. We tend to vote for media stars. The Democratic Party establishment preferred Hillary Clinton to Bernie Sanders because she had raised money loyally for other Democrats and gotten behind Obama like a good soldier. The public doesn't care. But that web of promises and deals permits a candidate to work with Congress. The party system doesn't always produce good candidates, but our current system is just scary.
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Tell me what you dislike or love about this video, so please comment below and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime a new video is released. This is a We Media production.